we tested frozen pizza from Walmart, Costco, Target, Aldi, and 10 more US stores. Hey everyone, welcome back. We have been on a mission. We tested milk, we tested ice cream, and today we are tackling one of the most purchased frozen foods in America, frozen pizza. Americans buy more than 2 billion frozen pizzas every single year. It is one of the most competitive categories in the entire grocery industry, with every major retailer now carrying their own store brand version alongside the big national names. So we did what we always do. We went out and bought frozen pizza from 13 of the biggest grocery retailers in the United States, and we put every single one through a rigorous blind testing process to find out which store is actually selling you the best frozen pizza. Now, here is how we kept things fair. We tested cheese pizza across all stores, not pepperoni, not supreme, not barbecue chicken, plain cheese. Because cheese pizza is the purest test of the fundamentals. You can judge the crust, the sauce, and the cheese without any toppings masking weaknesses or creating unfair advantages. When a frozen pizza cannot do cheese well, no topping is going to save it. We purchased store brand or most commonly stocked cheese pizza from Walmart, Costco, Target, Aldi, Kroger, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Safeway, Publix, Sam's Club, Sprouts, H-E-B, and Wegmans. All pizzas were baked according to their package instructions. All were tested blind, meaning tasters did not know which pizza came from which store during evaluation. And all were evaluated on 5 criteria: crust, sauce, cheese, overall flavor combination, and value based on price per ounce. Let us get into it, starting with Walmart. Walmart sells their store brand frozen pizza under the Great Value label, and it is one of the most purchased frozen pizzas in the country simply because of Walmart's reach. On crust, the Great Value cheese pizza baked up to a fairly thin, crispy base. It had good color on the bottom and edges, browning evenly in the oven. The texture was crackery rather than bready, which some panelists liked and others found a little too dry. On sauce, the tomato sauce was mild and slightly sweet. It was present in a thin, even layer, but did not have a lot of depth or complexity. It tasted like basic canned tomato sauce without a lot of seasoning character. Not bad, but not interesting. On cheese, the mozzarella melted evenly and had good coverage across the pizza. The color after baking was a light golden with some browning spots. The flavor was mild and functional without a lot of dairy richness. On overall flavor, the panel described the Walmart pizza as exactly what you would expect from a budget frozen pizza. Everything worked together, nothing stood out, and nothing was offensive. It tasted like frozen pizza in the most baseline sense of that phrase. Price per ounce was among the lowest in the test, making it an obvious budget choice. Overall, the Walmart Great Value frozen pizza is what it is. It feeds people, it is cheap, and it tastes like frozen pizza. If you are feeding a crowd on a tight budget, it does the job. If you want any kind of elevated experience, you will want to look at other options on this list. Next up, Costco. Now, Costco and frozen pizza have a legendary relationship. The Costco food court pizza is famous in its own right, but today we are testing what you actually buy in the freezer aisle to take home, and that is their Kirkland Signature frozen cheese pizza. On crust, the Kirkland Signature pizza had a noticeably thicker, more substantial crust than most of the competition. It baked up with a good crisp on the bottom while maintaining a chewy, bready interior. The edges puffed into a proper crust rim that several panelists specifically praised. It felt like a real pizza crust rather than a cracker base. On sauce, this is where Costco really distinguished itself. The tomato sauce had genuine complexity. There was a tanginess and depth that suggested real seasoning, not just sweetened tomato paste. Herbs were detectable. The sauce had body and flavor that held up on its own and complemented the cheese beautifully. On cheese, the Kirkland signature pizza was generously topped. The mozzarella coverage was excellent. It melted into a gorgeous, bubbly, golden layer, and the flavor was noticeably richer and more satisfying than the budget options. On overall flavor, the panel responded with consistent enthusiasm. Multiple people ranked it in their top 2. The combination of the chewy, substantial crust, the flavorful sauce, and the generous, well-melted cheese created a pizza that felt genuinely satisfying rather than just adequate. Crust per ounce was very competitive given the quality, especially in the multi-pack format. Overall, Costco delivers what is arguably the best value frozen pizza in this entire test. The quality is significantly above what the price would suggest, and for households that eat frozen pizza regularly, the multi-pack is a tremendous deal. Moving on to Target. Target sells frozen pizza under their Good and Gather brand, and the packaging is clean and approachable in the way that Target does everything. On crust, the Good and Gather cheese pizza had a medium thin crust that baked up with good color and a pleasant crunch. It was not as thick or as bready as the Costco pizza, but notably better than the cracker-thin Walmart crust. It had some chew and some structure. On sauce, the tomato sauce was well seasoned and had a pleasant, herby quality. There was more flavor complexity here than in the budget options, with a slight garlic and oregano note that elevated the overall pizza meaningfully. On cheese, the mozzarella melted evenly and had good color. The coverage was adequate, and the flavor was clean and pleasant, with a slightly better dairy quality than the bottom tier options. On overall flavor, the panel found the Target pizza to be genuinely enjoyable. A number of panelists ranked it solidly in the upper half of the test. The well-seasoned sauce was particularly praised as the highlight of an otherwise competent but not exceptional pizza. Price per ounce was moderate and felt appropriate for the quality. Overall, Target does a solid job with their store brand frozen pizza. It is a notch above the budget options and delivers a more enjoyable eating experience than the price might suggest. A good everyday choice for Target shoppers. Now let us talk about Aldi. Aldi sells frozen pizza under the Mama Kazi's brand, and it is one of the most talked about budget frozen pizzas in the country. Aldi fans will enthusiastically tell you that the Mama Kazi's pizza is a hidden gem, and going into this test, expectations from the panel were genuinely curious. On crust, the Mama Kazi's cheese pizza had a thin to medium crust with good crunch on the bottom. It baked up evenly and had decent structure. It was not thick or bready, but it held together well and had a pleasant texture without being overly crackery. On sauce, this is where Aldi surprised the panel. The tomato sauce had more personality than expected. There was a tanginess and a mild herb presence that gave it real flavor. It was not sophisticated, but it was clearly a step above generic sweetened tomato paste. On cheese, the mozzarella melted decently and had good coverage. The flavor was mild but genuine, and the golden color after baking was appealing. On overall flavor, the panel was consistently impressed for the price point. Several people who had been skeptical about budget frozen pizza came away saying that the Aldi pizza was genuinely enjoyable. Not the best pizza in the test, but clearly not the worst either, which given the price is a remarkable result. Price per ounce was the lowest in the entire test. Overall, Aldi continues to deliver extraordinary value. The Mama Kazi's frozen pizza is a legitimate competitor in this test at a fraction of the price of most options. For budget-conscious shoppers, It is one of the most compelling choices in the entire freezer aisle. Next is Kroger. Kroger sells their store brand frozen pizza, and given how well Kroger has performed across all of our previous tests, expectations were high going in. On crust, the Kroger cheese pizza had a medium thick crust that baked up beautifully. Good browning on the bottom, a pleasant chew in the middle, and a properly puffed edge. It had the structure and texture of a crust that was developed with some care rather than just pressed out as thin as possible to save on ingredients. On sauce, the Kroger sauce was one of the highlights of the test. It had genuine tomato flavor with a good balance of acidity and sweetness, clear herb seasoning, and a body that spread evenly and stayed flavorful through the baking process. Several panelists called it the best sauce in the test outright. On cheese, Kroger used a generous amount of mozzarella that melted into a beautiful, bubbly, lightly browned layer. The coverage was excellent, and the flavor was notably richer than the cheaper options, with a satisfying dairy quality that lingered pleasantly. On overall flavor, the panel gave Kroger consistently high scores across all categories. The pizza had a cohesion and overall quality that set it clearly apart from the budget options and put it in genuine competition with much more expensive pizzas. Multiple panelists ranked it their number one. Price per ounce was very reasonable for the quality delivered. Overall, Kroger once again proves that their store brand is exceptional. The frozen pizza is genuinely outstanding, and it represents one of the best values in this entire test. For anyone with a Kroger nearby, this is the pizza you should be reaching for. Now, Trader Joe's has a devoted following for their frozen foods, and their frozen cheese pizza has been a fan favorite for years. Going into this test, several panelists said it was a pizza they had bought regularly on their own. On crust, the Trader Joe's cheese pizza had a beautifully crafted thin crust with excellent char on the bottom. It baked up with a kind of crispness and slight unevenness that reminded several panelists of wood-fired or restaurant-style pizza. The texture had a chewiness and character that stood out immediately. On sauce, the Trader Joe's sauce was among the best in the test. It had genuine tomato complexity, a pleasant acidity, clear Italian herb seasoning, and a quality that felt closer to restaurant pizza sauce than typical frozen pizza sauce. Multiple panelists specifically praised it without knowing which pizza they were eating. On cheese, Trader Joe's used a high-quality mozzarella that melted into a gorgeous layer with beautiful bubble and browning. The flavor was noticeably superior to the budget options, with a freshness and richness that the panel responded to clearly. On overall flavor, Trader Joe's received some of the highest scores in the entire test. The combination of the charred, chewy crust, the flavorful sauce, and the quality cheese created a pizza that several panelists said reminded them of their favorite local pizzeria. Multiple people ranked it first. Price per ounce was moderate and felt justified by the quality. Overall, Trader Joe's frozen cheese pizza is one of the top performers in this test and arguably the best representation of what frozen pizza can aspire to be. If you have a Trader Joe's nearby and you have not tried their frozen pizza, you are missing out. Next up, Whole Foods. Whole Foods sells frozen pizza under their 365 brand, positioned as a cleaner ingredient, higher quality option. They also carry a wide range of premium third-party frozen pizzas, but we tested the 365 store brand for consistency. On crust, the 365 cheese pizza had a thin, cracker-style crust that baked up evenly with good color. It was crispier than the Trader Joe's or Kroger options, but thinner and less substantial. On sauce, the tomato sauce was clean and pleasant, with a simpler, less seasoned profile than the top performers. It tasted like good quality tomato without a lot of additional herb complexity. Clean, mild, and appropriate but not exciting. On cheese, the mozzarella quality was clearly above average. The coverage was consistent, the melt was excellent, and the flavor was noticeably fresh and clean. This was the strongest element of the Whole Foods pizza. On overall flavor, the panel found it to be good but not exceptional. The clean, simple approach to ingredients meant that nothing was offensive, but nothing was particularly memorable either. Several panelists said it tasted healthy in the sense that it was restrained rather than indulgent. Price per ounce was among the highest in the test. Overall, the Whole Foods 365 frozen pizza is a clean, well-made product with better than average ingredient quality. But as with their milk and ice cream, the price premium is difficult to fully justify when options like Trader Joe's and Kroger deliver a more satisfying eating experience for less money. Now let us talk about Safeway. Safeway sells their store brand frozen pizza under the Signature Select label. On crust, the Signature Select cheese pizza had a medium thin crust with decent structure and browning. It baked evenly and had a reasonable crunch without being too dry or crackery. On sauce, the tomato sauce was mild and moderately seasoned. It had a basic tomato sweetness with some herb notes in the background. Nothing complex, but nothing objectionable. On cheese, the mozzarella coverage was adequate and the melt was even and consistent. The flavor was standard and clean. On overall flavor, the panel found the Safeway pizza to be solidly average. It ticked all the boxes for what frozen pizza is supposed to be without doing anything particularly noteworthy in any category. A reliable, middle-of-the-road option, price per ounce was moderate. Overall, Safeway delivers exactly what you expect from a mid-range store brand frozen pizza. It is dependable and inoffensive, and if Safeway is your regular grocery store, their frozen pizza will not disappoint you. It just will not excite you either. Moving on to Publix. Publix has delivered exceptional results in our previous tests, and their store brand frozen pizza came with genuine anticipation from the panel. On crust, the Publix cheese pizza had a medium thick crust that baked up with impressive results. The bottom had a beautiful golden brown with good crunch, the interior was chewy and bready, and the edge puffed into a proper cornichon that looked and tasted like a real pizza. Several panelists immediately praised the crust before even evaluating the rest. On sauce, the Publix sauce was excellent. It had a genuine Italian seasoned tomato profile with good acidity, clear herb presence, and a body and flavor that elevated the entire pizza. It was among the better sauces in the test and matched well with the quality of the crust. On cheese, Publix was generous and clearly used a quality mozzarella. The coverage was outstanding, the melt was gorgeous, and the flavor had a richness and depth that the panel responded to enthusiastically. On overall flavor, Publix received some of the strongest scores in the entire test. The pizza had a cohesion and overall quality that made it feel genuinely restaurant adjacent rather than just frozen food. Several panelists ranked it first. Price per ounce was competitive and excellent value for what was delivered. Overall, Publix continues its remarkable performance across our test series. Their frozen pizza is exceptional and one of the top products in this entire test. If you are in the southeastern United States where Publix operates, their store brand frozen pizza belongs in your freezer. Now Sam's Club sells frozen pizza under their Members Mark brand, and like all Sam's Club products, you are buying in larger quantities. On crust, The members' marked cheese pizza had a good medium thick crust with decent structure and even browning. It was solid and substantial with a good chew and a proper edge. On sauce, the tomato sauce was pleasant and moderately well seasoned. There was a mild herb presence and a reasonable tomato depth that made it enjoyable without being a standout. On cheese, the mozzarella was generous and melted well, with good coverage and a satisfying golden color after baking. On overall flavor, the panel found the Sam's Club pizza to be solidly good. Not a top 3 finisher, but comfortably in the upper half of the test. It was satisfying, well made, and substantially better than the lowest tier options. Several panelists said it was exactly what they would want for a casual family pizza night. Price per ounce was very competitive in the bulk multi-pack format. Overall, Sam's Club delivers reliable, good quality frozen pizza at a bulk price that makes it an easy recommendation for families. It is not going to win a pizza competition, but it will keep a household happily fed at a price that makes sense. Next is Sprouts. Sprouts approaches frozen pizza from a natural and quality-focused angle, and their store brand offering reflects that philosophy. On crust, the Sprouts cheese pizza had a beautifully made thin crust with real character. It baked up with excellent crunch and a slight chew with charring around the edges that reminded multiple panelists of restaurant quality pizza. The crust was clearly made with quality ingredients and care. On sauce, the Sprouts sauce was one of the more interesting in the test. It had a genuine herb-forward tomato profile that felt closer to homemade pizza sauce than anything else in the lineup. The seasoning was more complex and more assertive than most competitors, and the panel responded to it very positively. On cheese, Sprouts used what tasted like a higher quality mozzarella. The melt was beautiful, the flavor was noticeably richer than the standard options, and the overall cheese experience felt premium. On overall flavor, Sprouts was one of the strongest performers in the test. The combination of the quality crust, the well-seasoned sauce, and the premium cheese created a pizza that several panelists ranked in their top 2. It had a character and quality that stood noticeably apart from the mainstream options. Price per ounce was on the higher end. Overall, Sprouts delivers a genuinely premium frozen pizza experience that justified its price point convincingly in this test. For pizza enthusiasts who want something closer to a real pizzeria experience from their freezer, Sprouts is an outstanding option. Now, H-E-B. H-E-B has been one of the dominant performers across all of our testing, and their frozen pizza came with the same high expectations their products always carry. On crust, the H-E-B cheese pizza had an exceptional crust. It was medium thick with outstanding browning on the bottom, a satisfying chew through the middle, and a beautifully puffed, slightly charred edge that looked like something from a proper pizza oven. The crust texture was the best in the test according to multiple panelists. On sauce, the H-E-B sauce was extraordinary. It had a deep, complex tomato flavor with clear Italian herb seasoning, a pleasant acidity that balanced the sweetness perfectly, and a body and richness that elevated the entire eating experience. Several panelists said the sauce alone was better than the entire pizza from some of the other options in the test. On cheese, H-E-B was generous, beautifully melted, and clearly a quality mozzarella. The bubbling, golden, slightly brown cheese layer was visually stunning, and the flavor was rich, fresh, and deeply satisfying. On overall flavor, H-E-B delivered the top scores in the test. The pizza had a quality and cohesion that the panel simply could not stop talking about. Multiple people said they would have guessed it was from a restaurant rather than a freezer. The word outstanding came up more times than for any other pizza in the test. Every element worked together at a level that the other options simply did not match. Price per ounce was excellent, making it one of the best value to quality ratios in the test. Overall, H-E-B is the top performer in this frozen pizza test, maintaining its position as one of the most remarkable grocery store brands in the country. The frozen pizza is genuinely outstanding and one of the best you will find at any price point. Texas shoppers, you already know. Everyone else, this is what you are missing. Finally, Wegmans. Wegmans has been consistently exceptional across all of our tests, and their frozen pizza carried the same expectation of quality their brand always delivers. On crust, the Wegmans cheese pizza had a beautifully made medium thick crust with excellent structure, outstanding browning, and a chew and texture that immediately stood out as premium. The edge puffed into a gorgeous rim with light char marks that the panel praised immediately. On sauce, the Wegmans tomato sauce was among the very best in the test. It was herb-forward, genuinely complex, and clearly made with quality tomatoes. The balance between acidity, sweetness, and seasoning was nearly perfect, and several panelists said it was the best pizza sauce they had eaten from a frozen pizza. On cheese, Wegmans used exceptional mozzarella. The coverage was generous, the melt was spectacular, and the flavor had a freshness and richness that matched anything else in the test. On overall flavor, Wegmans earned a place at the very top of the test alongside H-E-B. Every single element of the pizza was executed at a level that felt closer to artisan or restaurant quality than typical frozen food. Multiple panelists ranked it first, and the panel as a whole placed it among the 2 or 3 best options tested. Price per ounce was moderate and represented exceptional value for the quality. Overall, Wegmans is co-champion in this frozen pizza test alongside H-E-B. The pizza is genuinely outstanding, and if you have access to a Wegmans, it belongs in your regular grocery rotation. So what did we learn? First, the gap between the best and worst frozen pizza in this test is larger than the gap in our milk or ice cream tests. With milk and ice cream, everything was at least good. With frozen pizza, the difference between the top performers and the budget options was meaningful and noticeable to every single panelist. Second, the crust is the most important variable. The biggest quality differences came from the crust. The best pizzas had crusts with real texture, structure, chew, and character. The weakest pizzas had thin, crackery crusts that felt like a vehicle for toppings rather than a real pizza base. Third, sauce matters more than most people think. The pizzas with genuinely flavorful, well-seasoned sauces stood out clearly, even when tasters could not identify which pizza they were eating. The sauce is where personality lives in a cheese pizza. Now for our final rankings on taste. The top performers were H-E-B, Wegmans, Publix, Trader Joe's, Sprouts, and Kroger. These 6 consistently delivered the best eating experiences and are the pizzas we would most enthusiastically recommend. On value, the top performers were Aldi, Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club, and Kroger. These give you the best combination of quality and price for the single best overall recommendation combining taste, quality, and value. H-E-B takes the top spot for those who have access to it, followed closely by Wegmans and Publix. For the most widely available top performer, Kroger is our strongest recommendation nationally, and Trader Joe's is our pick for the best restaurant-adjacent frozen pizza experience. And Aldi once again deserves recognition as the best budget option. For the lowest price in the test, you get a pizza that will genuinely satisfy you, and that is a remarkable achievement. A few practical tips before you go. Always bake frozen pizza directly on the oven rack rather than on a baking sheet. The direct heat from below gives you a far crispier crust bottom, which makes a meaningful difference in the eating experience regardless of which pizza you buy. Let the pizza rest for 2 to 3 minutes after taking it out of the oven. This allows the cheese to set slightly and makes it easier to cut without everything sliding off. And if you want to elevate any frozen pizza significantly, a drizzle of good olive oil and a handful of fresh basil after baking does more than you might expect to improve the overall experience. We hope this breakdown helps next time you are standing in the frozen food aisle. Whether you are grabbing the Aldi pizza to feed a crowd on a budget, reaching for the Costco multi-pack for the household, or treating yourself to the best frozen pizza experience you can find from H-E-B or Wegmans, you now know exactly what you are getting. If this video was helpful, please like it, share it with your fellow frozen pizza fans, and subscribe for more honest comparisons across the products you buy every day. Leave a comment and tell us your go-to frozen pizza. We read every single one. See you in the next one.